In the summer of 1944, young men crossed an ocean to fight a war far from home. Among them was 25-year-old Private James Miller, a quiet man from Ohio, whose last letter was never finished. This is his story, a story written in mud, blood, and the silence that follows a soldier's disappearance. James Arthur Miller grew up during the hardest years America had known. The son of a factory worker, he left school at 16 to help feed his family. He was strong, dependable, and silent, the kind of young man who kept his fears to himself. In May of 1943, the war came for him. His mother received a letter 3 days before he left for Fort Benning. In it, he promised he would write every week. He kept that promise until December. For 6 months, James Miller became a soldier. He learned to march, to shoot, to dig a foxhole in frozen ground. The 1st Infantry Division at the Big Red Warning was already legendary. These were the men who would land first. In his letters home, James rarely mentioned fear. But his mother would later say she could feel it between the lines. The crossing took 3 weeks. Packed into steel bellies, thousands of young men sailed toward a war they had only heard about on the radio. James wrote to his sister that the nights were the worst. That's when the fear came. Not of dying, he said, but of letting the others down. By the time they reached England, spring had turned to early summer, and the invasion was days away. At dawn on June 6, 1944, James Miller waded into hell. The ramp dropped and the world became fire and metal. Men he had trained with for a year disappeared in seconds. There are no letters from that day. No words could describe it. By nightfall, the beach was won, but at a cost no one had imagined. James survived. Thousands did not. After the beach came the hedgerows. Ancient stone walls and dense brush turned every field into a fortress. Progress was measured in yards, not miles. James wrote less frequently now. When he did, his letters were shorter. His mother noticed he stopped asking about home. He only wrote about the weather, about when the rain might stop. Years later, she would understand. He was already somewhere else. By autumn, the Allies were pushing toward Germany. For a brief moment, victory seemed close. James wrote that he might be home by spring. But on December 16th, the Germans launched their final desperate gamble. The Battle of the Bulge had begun, and James Miller's division was directly in its path. On December 17th, Private James Miller's unit was ordered to hold a position in the Hurtgen forest. The temperature was below freezing. Supplies had not arrived. That night, a German counterattack broke through American lines. In the chaos, several men went missing. James Miller was among them. His body was never recovered. In his pocket, soldiers later found an unfinished letter to his mother. It ended mid-sentence. Private James Miller was one of 19,000 Americans who never came home from the war. His story is not unique, but it is his, and it is true. This film is dedicated to him and to all the young men who crossed an ocean, wrote letters they believed would be read, and disappeared into history. We remember them, not as heroes, but as human beings who were afraid and fought anyway.